So we're here today celebrating the relationship between Michael Tilson Thomas and the London Symphony Orchestra on the occasion of his 70th birthday and our upcoming American tour of the West Coast. Michael first conducted the London Symphony Orchestra in 1970. Of course, none of us were around in those days. No. But in 1988, he took up the position of principal conductor. And at that point, Andrew and Tim, you were members of the orchestra, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah, it was just before I
Neil,
joined.
you were around, weren't you?
Yeah, very much.
And in 1988, the London Symphony Orchestra was a very different animal from what it has become in 2015. Maybe you could reflect on some of those differences and what it was that Michael brought to the orchestra in those years.
Yeah, we forget that actually what was the atmosphere in the orchestra at the time, and it was as the organisation was at a very low ebb at that time. Certainly, I think it might still been continuing. I know when I joined in '86, we were still donating fees to the orchestra to keep it going. So for me, Michael's sort of legacy starts with, he's right at the beginning of what I would say is the rebuilding and the rebranding of the LSO. Because he came, and not only did he devote himself totally to the orchestra, it coincided with this like rebirth of the orchestra, restatement of our artistic goals, and that he was right there, instrumental and right at the beginning of it. And it was a real culture change because the atmosphere in the orchestra at the time was pretty dire.
Well, it was always a swashbuckling orchestra, but it was somewhat unreconstructed in those days, and perhaps what Michael brought was something that channeled the energies a little more usefully. I think he pointed out that the old-fashioned way of symphonic music making, where it was sort of us and them, didn't really work anymore.
So was there a very different atmosphere in rehearsals compared to what had been before?
I think that the difficulty was before we had these spectacular, wonderful concerts with Claudio Abbado, who was a complete musical genius, but his involvement with the orchestra was purely musical. The concert happened, that was that. With Michael, he saw the bigger picture that the orchestra actually needed in order to get any better. It needed to work together, and it was quite interesting that was perhaps the beginning of a time when the old-fashioned ideas of orchestral membership were put to the test, and we made some pretty good decisions. The only thing we couldn't offer him was stability of concertmasters, and if you remember, by the time Michael had been here about 10 years, we gave him a sweatshirt with the name of every concertmaster that had worked for him, and there was I know he's a slight fellow, but there was still room for quite a lot of signatures on there.
And was there a big change in the type of repertoire or additions to the repertoire that we were doing? Was it a different take on things?
Yeah, absolutely. Although, I mean, he kept on the second Viennese school and that we'd worked on with Claudio and all that repertoire. He just widened it enormously and brought in, obviously, a lot of the transatlantic composers.
But also, we did loads of those, which were a first, really, for us. The discovery concerts where, we'd play the major work in the second half and he'd present and take the audience through, the structure of the piece in the first half and do a whole sort of show, if you like, and they were hugely successful.
Well, that was something that he was brilliant at, I think. I mean, it was very much in the Lenny Bernstein mould, but I have to say that I thought, Michael did it even better because I spoke to him about it and he didn't prepare any of the words at all. He winged it, but he just winged it so professionally, and it was so brilliant, erudite, thoughtful, and the audience really latched onto it. And I know quite a few of those were taken by the BBC. Certainly Heldenleben and Eroica as well was another one,
and
Symphony Fantastique, and they were just fantastic. I really thought that was Michael in his element, really, of sharing the music with people and just being able to explain it so well and make it so accessible.
Because that diversity of repertoire has a massive impact on your lives as percussionists, doesn't it?
For sure.
It certainly
does.
What
have been some of your highlights in Michael's time?
Well, I always look forward to see Michael's name on the upcoming schedule, and for us as percussion players, it means that we're gainfully employed because he always brings such interesting music for us. Yes, we get the Mahler symphonies, the Shostakovich symphonies, but some of the Americana that he's brought along in recent times and back in the early days. I mean, I started playing with the orchestra in very early 1993, so I felt I sort of joined this juggernaut. You know, it's very interesting for me hearing how it was, you know, a sort of change in situation for the orchestra generally. So I jumped onto this moving train with this wealth of amazing repertoire that Michael would bring along. Some of the Copeland that we did with him. Obviously, he has a direct link with some of the composers that he brought to the orchestra, and it always meant that we had a big percussion section, and we were well used, big diversity of instruments. He was always very, very keen to talk about sounds with us. So it was terrific to have a sounding board and somebody who was interested in what we were doing as well.
And he was a conduit to Lenny, which I think was really important, because not long after Michael became principal conductor, we worked with Lenny for the last time in Sapporo, if you remember, in 1990.
That was the time when they set up the Sapporo International Festival, wasn't it?
That's right, and we worked with Lenny in the July, and that was my first date as a member. And sadly, by October, Lenny was dead. So it was fantastic for us, and I think so many people in the orchestra, that, you know, the relationship between Michael and Lenny was so close. And in those early years, we did a lot of Bernstein repertoire. You know, we used to knock West Side out all of the time. It became a sort of staple piece. And then this Quiet Place suite, which was not that well known, but I mean, we played that all over the world.
And arias and barcarals.
Arias and barcarals.
Tell us about that, Neil.
Yes, Neil, do.
Well, this was another Lenny Bernstein piece, and there's a bit of a swingy sort of movement in it. And I think there'd been a performance of it a few years before, and he needed a couple of guest vocalists for. There's this bit of dialogue with Thomas Hampson, who you know, we work with a lot with Michael, very, very fine singer. And there's this sort of scatty type thing that we were doing, and it had to be in rhythm. So, for whatever happened, it came to the percussion section. So on the Deutsche Grammophon recording of Arias and Barcarals, it's got, you know, London Symphony Orchestra, Thomas Hampson vocals, and then underneath that it says Neil Percy, Simon Carrington, additional vocals. So
Can you remember those additional vocals?
Yes, would you like to give us a rendition now?
I think you probably can.
no.
I know, David and Tim, you've been involved with Michael's work down in the New World Symphony in Miami, had first-hand experience of that. It seems that Michael's always been trying to sort of break down the barriers between the listener and the performers, and find new avenues to allow people to appreciate music of all genres.
He's done it.
He's done it, yeah, he's the man.
I mean, there are lots of people who talk about breaking down barriers and reaching out and taking concert hall music out of the concert hall. And Michael, unusually among visionary people, has actually made it all happen. I've seen it done. He's managed to put together, through being who he is and knowing who he knows and what he knows, the most wonderful concert hall in Miami Beach. And part of the design, it's a wonderful building by Frank Gehry, who, it turns out, used to babysit for Michael. It's not something that you could have planned or predicted. There is a large wall, and the wall is on the side of a beautiful square with palm trees and bougainvillea, and the most fantastic sound system by Mayer Sound. And Saturday nights, there are regular concerts which attract something in the order of 2,500 people, which is impressive enough, but in a place like Miami Beach, it really isn't what you expect. The quality of the sound is fantastic. The quality of the picture is fantastic, because it was all purpose-built. It was all thought through. And not only does the music come out of the concert hall, but Michael, as we said, has an extraordinary gift for talking about and conveying music. But Michael genuinely sees only music and feels only music with huge relish. And because of his hugely Catholic taste and ability to get to the heart of different styles of music. It, of course, gives him a huge perspective on everything that he does.
Yes, well, you were talking about the way Michael communicates, but I mean, it's down to even the fact that when he walks in backstage before a rehearsal at the beginning of each season, he says hello to everyone. He says, hello, hello. And then if he sees a new, and he knows everyone's name, always knows everyone's name. And then when he sees someone who his name he doesn't know, he'll always say, hello, friend, what's your name?
Yeah, always friend.
And he always calls him friend. And it's just so lovely. It's quite a rare thing in a conductor. To be just so personable. And he wants to know who they are, what they're playing, if they're a new member or if they're a guest, or, you know, he's always just, it's just very refreshing to have someone who's so personable. But I mean, for me personally, and rather poignantly, I mean, you know, I was married to the third trumpet, Nigel, and sadly he died 3 years ago. And very soon after he died, my phone rang, and it was Michael, and he was in a break in his rehearsal in San Francisco, and he extended his break to ring me at a suitable time in London to have a long chat about Nigel, about what had happened. And I just felt that just showed that, you know, it isn't all for show. Michael is really true in his soul and his feelings for people. And then he went on to conduct the concert that was in memory of Nigel, which Nigel would have liked because Michael was his favourite conductor for musical reasons, for personal reasons. And again, in that concert, in the interval, you know, even in the middle of an arduous concert, Michael made time to come out and see Nigel's family and speak to his mother and his son and his daughter and myself. And I just think it really showed what a beautiful person he is.
Amazing, yeah. So we have our West Coast American tour coming up, and we've got some great concerts, some great repertoire with Michael. What are you most looking forward to, Maxine and Matt?
Vegas.
Of course.
A free day in Vegas, that's what I'm looking for.
It's going to be fun. I love touring with MTT, probably because my first ever tour with this orchestra in the late 90s was with MTT, and it was so much fun. And I remember him throwing like a great party in Vienna, and I thought, wow, I just left music college like a couple of months before, and I thought, wow, this is what touring's like. It must be sort of amazing all the time, playing concerts, having parties and stuff, and it's not really. Obviously, we've had receptions and things with other people, but he always goes, you know, he goes around the party, speaks to everyone individually. It's lovely. He always makes time for people. As Bindi said, I remember the first time I came in and I was probably just sort of milling around backstage, not knowing what, you know, where I was, anything, and he came and chatted to me. And I just think that's lovely, that we're not just faces that he's staring at. He knows something about everyone. He always makes time to say something or, you know, ask about your life. I think that's really lovely. So I'm really looking forward to the 3 weeks away. I think that's going to be, yeah, a lot of fun.
I think that we forget, being classical musicians in London, that classical music is part of show business, and certainly as practiced by MTT, and certainly as practiced by MTT in America, it surely is show business, as it should be. And I think that we've suffered by being too shy about selling ourselves as entertainers and as what we do as an entertainment. And part of Michael's genius when it comes to things like planning programs is the all-round entertainment thing.
He has a great imagination, doesn't he? And vision to think of all the things that, the groundbreaking things he's done. But I think also that's sort of in his music, and the fact that, you know, we've done amazing performances of, like, On the Town, as we remember, but then A Mile a Nine at 11 in the morning in New York in my early years in the orchestra, which was very profound and very moving. And then I also remember playing in a disco in Ravenna, maybe somewhere, and it was a late night concert. There was a disco ball, there were sofas with cigarette burns in them, and it was a full audience. But Michael still gave that, you know, the razzle dazzle that went suitably with the
Type
disco.
5. And the night before, we'd done Mahler 5 in Salzburg, I remember that.
So that shows Michael's versus Mahler 5 in Salzburg, and the next night and he's still giving his all, and interpreting the music in his in Michael's way.